right, we've got more now on that CBS News exclusive interview with Elon Musk as he begins a brand new week, not as an official government employee. However, some behind the scenes say he still has the ear of the president. We learned this information as reaction poured into his work at DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency. And we know that while he was making the changes that he made under DOGE, he was also very much aware of what the public was saying. Here's his reaction to that public reaction.
What was saying to happen was that, it's a bit unfair because, DOGE became the whooping boy for everything. So if there was some cut, real or imagined, everyone would blame DOGE. I've had people think that, somehow DOGE is going to stop them from getting their Social Security check, which is completely untrue.
Well, I guess I was just thinking about the, move fast and break things, before you really understand what the agency does.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of it is depends on where you're coming from. So, I'm like a proponent of smaller government, not bigger government. So now if somebody's a proponent of, more government programs and bigger government, and they see, hey, DOGE is cutting all these government programs, then they'll be fundamentally opposed to that because they just think the government should do more things. That's just a fundamental, I guess, ideological opinion. But my frank opinion of the government is that, the government is just like the DMV that got big. Okay, so when you say let's have the government do something, you should think, do you want the DMV to do it?
So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Olivia Rinaldi. Musk also seemed to say that he felt like the bill that President Trump has billed as the big, beautiful bill sort of undermines and undercuts what he worked on at DOGE.
Yeah, it was quite a notable interview that CBS News was able to get with Elon Musk, airing the week that he took a step back from government. And in that interview, he talked about the big, beautiful bill and said he was a little disappointed to see it. He said a bill can be both big and beautiful, but this bill in particular would undermine the work that DOGE had done. And we know that DOGE had worked to cut about 160 to about 175 billion. Those numbers are, we're still working those out. But Elon Musk, said and sided with the Congressional Budget Office, who said that this bill would add 3.8 trillion to the deficit over the next, or to the debt rather, over the next 10 years. That's a figure that the White House has disputed and said that the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan group, is not factoring in certain things like extending the tax cuts. So as a result, their figure about adding this much to the debt is not true. But even more so, Elon Musk just saying, look, I don't agree with the bill and it undermines our efforts to really cut back government spending, was quite notable, especially given his relationship with Trump. Also in the interview, Musk went on to say that he doesn't want to take credit for everything in the administration, trying to really distance himself from the administration on his way out. It was very, very fascinating read.
Right. And speaking to what does look like an effort to sort of distance himself from all things Trump presidency, one has to wonder if he's not trying to reframe the narrative here. In that soundbite, he talked about how he wants smaller government. Some people want bigger government and wanted to package it up all that way. But we all know, and we've reported, that during his work at DOGE, there were also allegations being made by Elon Musk that there were bad things going on inside these government agencies, that it was more than just big government versus small government. Are you seeing an effort to maybe reframe the narrative a little bit in trying to push back? I mean, we know that Elon Musk companies reportedly have suffered a great deal in the wake of his work with President Trump.
It's a great question. I mean, a lot of the accusations that they had made of widespread waste, fraud, and abuse across government were just kind of unfounded. I'm reminded of their efforts going through the Social Security Administration, saying that there were hundreds and thousands of payments being made to people who don't exist or who are old. And in reality, there were just a handful of them, and it seemed more like clerical errors rather than a fraudulent use of government spending and money. even something that President Trump had included in his State of the Union address or his joint address rather, that he gave to Congress. But in that, that was kind of an unfounded thing when they actually went and looked at those payments, and they were able to fix them, but it wasn't, totaling the amount that they had particularly said. He also took a couple sledgehammers to the Consumer Financial Group. He also dismantled U.S. aid. There was a lot of firings, a lot of people who were let go in government. So he's leaving a wake, certainly, of some change in Washington, but whether or not that change is sustained throughout the next couple of years, decades, long-term reorientation of the government, that really remains to be seen. Of course, he says that the work of DOGE will continue, but whether or not there is actually this sustained effort to change Washington and Washington spending, it's hard to really tell that right now, and it's hard to see whether or not that feeling of DOGE will continue on, especially as it's really up to Congress to make a lot of these cuts and changes. We know even that rescission package that's going to head to Congress later this week that has some of those DOGE cuts in it. It has some related to U.S. aid and to NPR and PBS, but it's not the entirety of the cut. So it's really Congress, essentially. It's up to them to really enact these and to carry on this work, and we'll have to see if they do that.
All right, fascinating times. Olivia Rinaldi, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with us on CBS News 24/7.